Very nice. That's the musical vindication. When you watch the MTV Awards today or something similar, and we see who was on stage, then you ask yourself, artists can really do something, but only a few do anything. Bono does good things. He's very active. There's maybe half a dozen worldwide doing good things. Shouldn't more famous people do this because they have an audience?
I mean, you're right. I mean, music moves people. I received some feedback from a woman who comes from Indonesia. She lives in America now, but lived in Europe for a long time. Her father was in prison camp, and she only heard the CD, but she didn't see the booklet. She asked me, how are you able to tell the story like that? She was really moved. And that's what happens. I mean, there is something special in the music. You can read the 12 pages in the booklet, but you can feel something as I use the music to tell the story. I believe music is the most powerful thing we have, and we should do something positive with it. So I'm trying to take a really sad, terrible piece of history and do something positive with it. I'd like to perhaps donate money to the school in Indonesia where my mother fled, or do an exchange with young Japanese. I mean, do something positive.
That's the next question. Can't you do something with Japanese or with Japanese musicians or with young people there?
Yeah, there's a group in America called Hiroshima, and they're a well-known jazz group, and I haven't had direct contact, but through mutual friends I know of them. And I'd like to ask them, what do you think about doing something together? I think it's really important. It's our intention not to point fingers at anyone or say you're the evil ones. We want to do something good. I mean, somebody else told me that I was able to tell this story in a very positive way. That's a huge compliment. I mean, you can see the music is powerful in moving people. And I hope through this exposure that people will take an active interest and realize that we don't have it so bad today. It was a lot worse 65 years ago. We should stop
complaining.
Complaining, yeah, exactly. We do that all the time, and we shouldn't do that because we can make the future better.
That's the point. We can't change the past.
No.
But we can learn from the past, and we can learn together. You know, not just to point the finger or say you're guilty or it's your fault. Instead of that, what can we do so that something like that never happens again?
Right, and you know, it's also a story about people. I mean, for example, when the Japanese invaded, my grandmother had an encounter with a Japanese officer and spoke English to him and told him she was German. Then he accompanied her to her house so she could pick up her belongings. He kind of protected her the first few days. I mean, but later it was found out that she was Dutch and she had to go into prison camp. That's the irony of it all. Her brother had to serve in the German army during World War II. The whole thing boils down to that we're all just people. If we take everything away, like passports, political ideology, and everything else, people are just people. Getting along with people and interacting with people is really, really important. We should try to do this better by learning from our past so we can make our future a lot brighter.
I will ask this very cautiously. In America, there's an attorney on every street corner. Good ones, bad ones, like everywhere in the world. But many of them make a lot of money. How come none of these guys took this case?
I can tell you exactly why. The Dutch have never had any advocates. I mean, I don't wish to say at all that what happened here in Germany during World War II wasn't horrible. It was really terrible. But the attorneys in the United States, they've decided to fight for this instead, because a lot of the family members and survivors came to the States. The fact with the Netherlands was, they didn't have an opportunity because, first of all, they signed the treaty, and secondly, they're all over the place. I mean, my mother came to America with her brother, but many went to Australia and Canada. I mean, they're all over the place. They're spread out. They're not in the Netherlands anymore. And this is sort of a forgotten story. But, you know, a story like this cannot be forgotten, and that's the point.
But despite that, the forced laborers' compensation, which was paid out to the Eastern Europeans or the Russians or the Polish, the Romanians, the Israelis, or people in the US, or wherever, there were treaties that were supposed to avoid compensation, but they were still paid out.
I know, and maybe we can bring about a huge amount of attention about this story through this CD and this project, that the compensation will come. Maybe when my mother or her friend Edith isn't around anymore, I as a family member could take this compensation and do something good with it. Donate it or something.
Lay the groundwork for something.
Exactly, the building blocks for the whole thing.
A memorial here and one in Holland or wherever.
Well, where it should be is a big question. I mean, it could be in Indonesia. There's a very small statue in The Hague for this war in Indonesia, but Edith told me that it's really hard to find. We should make one like the Vietnam Memorial. I mean, put all the names on it. I mean, Vietnam was a long story for us, and it was a very hard part of our history. Very painful, and it took a long time to build this memorial. Many were against it, many were for it, but in the end, people go there, and they cry when they stand before it. It moves people. We can do the exact same thing for the Dutch. My grandmother's name and all the others as well. If anybody watching has relatives or knows someone who was interned, send us an email. Send it to my website, davidbeckertribune.com. I do answer all my emails, although I'm on the road a lot. I'd love to hear from anyone. We're trying to get attention in other ways, too, in the Netherlands, for example. I had contact with the Queen. They have kind of a guilt complex there. I think they should have dealt with it differently from the beginning, but they never did.
What did your mother say about it?
My mother's really excited and moved by this. I mean, her best friend Edith had tears in her eyes. She listens to it every day and said, "How were you able to tell my story in this music?" That's the best gift that I could have given her. She didn't know anything about it. If somebody had asked me a year ago what this thing was going to be, I really didn't know. We started in May 2009 in Argentina. We did some sessions in LA and did some sessions in Germany. It took a whole year. Before it became this, it took a long time. I always had the feeling that somebody was standing behind me, guiding me. Maybe it was my grandmother, maybe the thousands of victims. It was a really interesting project for me, unlike any other record I've ever made.
When you perform, you talk about the story. And after the concert, depending on the size of the venue, you meet people. Are there lots of questions?
Oh, there's a lot of questions. I mean, people are really moved, and they say there's something special in the music. And they ask about my grandmother or something else. I mean, people can feel it, you know. We're in the beginning stages right now. I mean, tomorrow we're going to be in Osnabrück, and then next week we'll be in Austria. But the bigger concerts with the backdrop and photos and more of a detailed description of the story will be in 2011. It's not the kind of concert for a jazz club where we play some tunes. I mean, we're playing these pieces for the very first time live, though, and the response has been great. We've done 2 concerts so far, but the audience have been really, really, really supportive and really great, and they can feel that the music has a special background. It had to be like that, though, because the level of the story was so high that we had to reach that. It wouldn't have sufficed to just play a blues or something.
So, now we've spoken about the family story. So, now let's talk a bit about David Becker, the guitarist. When did you begin? What fascinated you about music? Did you have a role model?
Well, I've been playing music my entire life, basically. I mean, my brothers and I, and there's 3 of us, actually. My oldest brother played piano, Bruce began on guitar, and I started on drums, and then we switched. I played the trumpet, and I had a really good music teacher in junior high school named Ted Dechter. He played with lots of the big bands like Harry James, Stan Kenton, and was in the whole LA jazz scene, also the classical scene. He taught us a lot. And later with guitar, I listened to Wes Montgomery, Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Miles Davis, guitar players, of course, like Jim Hall. Joe DiOrio was a huge influence. We've known each other a long time and recorded together. And of course, I listened to the younger players at the time, like Pat Metheny, John Schofield, John Abercrombie, also well known here in Germany, Ralph Towner, and also Eberhard Weber, the bassist from Germany, was a big influence. I always loved his music. He was a huge, huge influence, and I actually met him once.
Pat Metheny is very famous.
Metheny is really famous. He's an interesting guy. I mean, I've known him personally for quite a while. He's a nice guy. He's got a lot from Eberhard Weber, just like his partner Lyle Mays. Their musical influences are some of the same as ours. You have to study the history of music. You can't just start with John Scofield and that's it. I mean, you have to trace the music and how it evolved. Who influenced whom? My brother and I listened to Art Blakey and a whole bunch of recordings. We always had the opportunity to hear different things. My mother's family was musical. My mother's grandmother and her family were musical. Two of the members of the family made music with Clara Schumann and her husband. They played piano together. My grandfather's family sang and played piano. I guess it's in my genes.
Your road was already paved.
Yeah, and traveling was something I've done since I was a child. My father took us to Europe. I was raised in Woodland Hills, but we lived in Cincinnati, Cleveland, Chicago, Detroit, and then we settled in L.A. My father put us on a plane, basically, not during the summer vacations, but during the school year for 1 month. The teachers gave us homework, which we never really did, and then we drove in a car for 4 weeks. Naturally, my grandfather was in the Netherlands, and we visited him, and my mom had cousins in Germany, and my father loved Austria, and that's how it was.
It certainly didn't hurt you. It seems to have helped. How many days are you at home, and how many days are you on the road?
Well, home for me is 2 places. I have a place in Germany and one in America, but I'm hardly there. I'm always in hotel rooms. On the road for me is 100,000 miles a year.
Then we wish you twofold success. First, the musician David Becker, and mostly the creator of this beautiful CD, Batavia. All the best, and I hope that many, many viewers have tuned in and perhaps can relate to the CD. It's really, really worthwhile. Thank you, and have a nice evening. Yours truly, Roger Horne.